Welcome to a Total War Top 5 video, and today we are looking at the most underrated factions ever. These here are factions that are often swept aside, overlooked, ignored, but actually turn out to be either secretly powerful or very enjoyable. Playable factions only. However, I am going to count all Rome Total War factions in there, as a lot of people have made them all playable anyway, and played them all. And starting this off in number 5, we actually have one for Rome Total War, and it's Pontus. Pontus is actually a decent faction. It's basically a copy of Macedon, but with chariots and cataphracts. Although they do lack in the early tier units, once you get to that mid tier and late tier, they are definitely powerful, and there's a reason why they often come to dominate most of Anatolia. However, there's not that much YouTube Let's Play coverage for Pontus, and they are often overlooked. But at the end of the day, they are a secretly powerful faction, and kind of enjoyable as well, with many different ways to go. The reason why I think they're overlooked is because their start is not that great, but once you get into it, once you get some good units on the field, they're definitely a very fun faction to play. Number 4, we have Rome 2 Total War Bactria. Now Bactria often does get swept aside to the far corners, because that's quite literally where it is. It starts in a corner, you know, it's an eastern faction, not really that much land at the start. Overall, a lot of people would see this as a dull faction, and I would agree at the start it kind of is, but once you get the ball rolling, like with Pontus, they do become a very powerful and interesting faction. So yeah, Rome 2's Bactria. Number 3, and we have, this is a weird one, I've gone for the Kingdoms Total War Americas campaign, the Natives. Now, as you can probably see from this gameplay, the Natives are actually much more impressive than I originally gave them credit for, and they are often swept aside as being the simple, weaker faction. People usually play as a Spanish, that's why most people do the Americas campaign, because they've got the gunpowder, they're meant to dominate, but these Natives, they are crazy. They're actually much stronger than people would think. But look at the speed, they run really fast, they've got high morale, they get a lot of kills, they take a lot of losses, but that's okay, because their units are cheap. In my opinion, why they're underrated is because they're heavily overshadowed by the more powerful Spanish colonial empire. And speaking of overshadowed factions, we have an honourable mention on this list, which I thought did deserve a spot, but I wasn't going to put it on here. It was more 6th or 7th place, but I believe it does deserve a mention. And that is the Eastern Roman Empire, for both barbarian invasion and Attila. Eastern Rome. Why? Because it gets overshadowed by the West. You know, it's not as challenging, but it is just as enjoyable, probably more enjoyable. But given that, you know, the era that it's set in, it's always overshadowed by the Western Romans, which is its main weakness, and I think the faction does often get swept under the rug a bit because of that. Overall, a very underrated faction. Number 2, and we got one that most people probably did not expect. Attila Total War, the Venerians, mostly due to their one trait, in touch with the ground, which means that all their farms provide 0 penalties. That's right, you get no squalor and no public order penalties from farming as the Venerians, which really allows a player to use a lot of their build slots and invest in farms. You don't have to go as deep into the public order, you don't have to go as deep into sanitation buildings, because your buildings don't really cause any issues there. You can focus heavily with your build slots on farms, on the ones that don't provide that much food though, the ones that provide more gold, and then what you got coming in is loads of free wealth from farming or trade, whatever. You got lots of wealth coming in, and also you will have a lot of spare food still, even though you're focusing more on the economic ones. Give that to the Huns, pay them off in food so that they don't attack you, let them take all the land, and then you can easily recolonise their settlements, given the other trait the Venerians have, the cultural trait, where I think it's free, it doesn't cost any money. build more basic farms there, get more money, and at the end of the day, the Venerians become this economic powerhouse in Eastern Europe, which is really good. Overall, a very underrated faction in Attila Total War. And in first place, the most underrated faction, a faction that definitely deserves a lot more credit, and it's for Medieval 2 Total War, and I've gone with Sicily. Sicily does deserve a lot more credit and a lot more coverage on YouTube. You know, I'll go over some other basics about it first. Their navy can rival Venice. They start with a castle and a city, and they're well protected as well, you know, on the coast, which provides a very natural border for them. They've also got access to the Norman Knights as well, a very powerful cavalry unit, which is actually stronger than Teutonic Order Knights and Knights Hospitallers. And also just, generally speaking, very good, interesting roster, with part Christian units and part Muslim units as well, to represent their start. And the main reason why they're on here is their location. Right in the middle of the map, at the southern tip of the Italian peninsula, these can literally go anywhere that they want. They can get a ballista, sail up to Milan, take Genoa or Venice, without the Pope being too angry. Because, you know, you're not going to get excommunicated if you use a ballista to get in. You can go for Tunis, dominating North Africa, or you can go for Egypt, Crusade, you can go for Byzantium. There's so many options available for you when you play as Sicily. But I find that it's often overlooked, it's overshadowed by Venice. You know, the Republic of Venice, their trading empire, you're overshadowed by them. You're overshadowed by Milan and their industrial powerhouse and their crossbowmen. So yeah, you're often overshadowed, you are swept to the side, but trust me, Sicily, very good campaign, and in my opinion, very underrated. That's been my list. I know a lot of people will disagree, people have other thoughts on here. Please let me know what they are, and feel free to suggest ideas for other future top 5s as well. I do hope you've enjoyed, please subscribe for more, share this with anyone you think may be interested. I've been MELKOR, until the next one, goodbye.